For more on the downsides of the growing demand for fish, I spoke to Brian Albaum. He's the analyst for Seafood Watch at the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Fishing or overfishing, as you mentioned, is one that is very complex. We've got very delicate ecosystems out there in the oceans, and humans are trying to take a portion of those ecosystems for our own consumption. Humans in general have more of a taste for some of the higher trophic level species. These are going to be the carnivorous species, the tunas, the salmons, the swordfishes of the ocean. Just by the very definition of the ecological systems in which they exist, there are fewer of these fish out there. So if we were eating things like sardines and squid, there would be a lot more of those animals for us to consume. Overfishing itself is certainly an issue, but another issue is pollution. If you've got runoff, agricultural runoff or chemical runoff, human wastes that are being discharged into the ocean, these are going to have very significant impacts in terms of the wild populations of fish that are existing.
Have we seen evidence of pollution affecting the ecosystem on a scale that perhaps would open a lot of eyes?
Sure. In the Pacific Northwest, as we were discussing earlier, we've got issues of damming of rivers. You've got decreased water flow in some rivers, agricultural runoff from the Mississippi River. Discharging into the Gulf of Mexico has created a pretty significant dead zone there, an area of very low oxygen, and it's an area that a lot of fish are not able to survive in. So that's kind of one large-scale example for you.
Brian, some say the solution is what's wrong with the fish farms, right? That doesn't affect the wildlife out there in the wild, but that's controversial as well. Why?
Yeah, so a lot of fish farms that are in operation today are actually located in the marine environment. The majority of salmon farming around the world takes place in what we call marine net cages. These are essentially mesh cages in the ocean where water is free to flow into and out of that growing environment. And now this is represents a very close connection between the farms and the wild environment. If we were to remove those farms to physically separate the farms from the surrounding environment, you're going to be able to mitigate some of those impacts that salmon farming is happening.
So, I mean, this is wonderful that you're highlighting a very, very important problem. But here's the other issue that I see is that I don't see international organizations or governments on a very high level addressing this issue with a sense of urgency. And I'm just curious, what would you like to see occur in that arena?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd like to see some more cooperation between some of the international governments. You've got governments making decisions that are only affecting their territories or their waters. What you need is a much more comprehensive global what we call an ecosystem-based management approach, where you're looking at systems not as individual countries, but as a total ocean or a total ecosystem.
Are there certain types of fish that we should just flat out stop consuming or fishing because we're worried about extinction?
Yeah, the bluefin tuna is a great example of that. It's been fished to near extinction, yet the global demand for bluefin tuna is massive. So you've got fishing fleets that are going out, whether legally or illegally, catching these fish to supply this growing demand. And there's a real opportunity for humans as a species around the planet to change the way that we look at seafood. To be eating things I mentioned earlier, where tuna is very high up on the food chain. If we eat things that are a little bit lower on that food chain, there's a lot more of them out there, and we've got the same health benefits from these animals. But especially in America, you don't have people who want to eat a lot of sardines or anchovies. They want to be eating salmon and tuna. In the wild, these salmon and tuna are eating anchovies and sardines. That's where they're getting those great health benefits from. And so if we move our eating habits a little bit down that food web, it's going to have some pretty significant impacts, positive impacts for the ocean ecosystems.
It may not be in America, but there is one part of the world where consuming fish is really much a very big part of their culture, and that's in Japan.
Very much so.
They've also experienced a lot of controversy over dolphin as well, among other issues. And I'm just curious, the Japanese say that it's part of their culture and therefore it can be managed. The global community thinks that there needs to be some real changes, perhaps not in the laws, but maybe in the culture itself. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty big ask to ask a country to change a culture that they have enjoyed and observed for a very long time. It's something that isn't going to happen overnight, but I think with some increased education and awareness, it is something that could happen.